Welcome to the 10X podcast, conversations with B2B marketers and sales professionals about what truly matters to building scalable, sustainable, and substantial revenue growth. This episode is brought to you by Amplify.Marketing, experts in B2B website design on HubSpot CMS. In this throwback to 2020, and when the first wave of the pandemic had passed, and how it impacted revenue generation, this was a panel discussion hosted by Jamie Worrall from Amplify and was with Kat Warboys from HubSpot in Australia, along with Sam Howie from Unleashed, a SaaS platform based in the UK. Sit back, listen and enjoy.
Hello and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to have you join us. I'm Jamie Worrall, B2B tech marketer and client partner here at Amplify. And in this session, we discuss the topic of transforming revenue generation and what the next normal is shaping up to be. Now, it's fair to say our current need to sell at a social distance has accelerated B2B marketing initiatives. It's prompted a rethink of how we build trust and relationship in the sales cycle, and this in turn impacts how we engage, how we build pipeline and revenue. So in this episode, we felt it important that we gather both a marketing, a sales, and a customer service perspective on transforming revenue generation, and specifically unpack some insights into how B2B businesses have adapted or changed the way they engage with the market as a result of COVID-19. We wanted to talk through some examples of how we've seen this adaptation in practice and take a look at some of the obstacles to moving prospects through the marketing and sales cycle and how to overcome those. So joining me in this discussion, I'm very fortunate to have three senior leaders with me today. Firstly, Kat Warboys, Head of Marketing ANZ at HubSpot, Sam Howie, Head of UK Sales at Release Software, and Samuel Williams, GM Marketing at Certus Solutions. So welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to have you along.
Hi, Jamie, great to be here.
Awesome. Okay, guys. So look, I'm just going to kick in to gear with some questions. So firstly, the first questions we'll run through from a strategic point of view. So Kat, I've got a question for you. So thinking about things from an APAC perspective, given the B2B sales process has drastically changed this year, what shift have you seen in the market around sales and marketing communications and pipeline development?
Yeah, it's a big question. I guess in short, we've seen a lot of change as everybody has, the way people are living and consequently buying and researching is completely changed. And I think, the big thing here is this was all part of a trend we were already on a trajectory to see. So the digitalization of marketing and sales. What COVID has done in particular during these times is just really accelerated that trend. So even from your smallest brick and mortar stores suddenly forced to make sure that they digitalize their process. And that's all the way through to even, large organizations that might have been a little bit stuck in the old ways. It became less of a choice of when they might digitalize to now you kind of have to. So I think that's the biggest one. And we're really seeing that play out, obviously, in the whole online experience, from how we're researching and finding content to how we're actually going through with the purchase, whether that's completely touchless for some companies that are doing a really good job of that, to actually trying to engage with sales teams in a more remote way. This is nothing new to everybody, but I think that it's a good thing, meaning that this acceleration hopefully means that, it's given everybody a chance to, bring all of their digital tools up to scratch. And that's something that is here to stay. So even when we go back to normal, whatever normal looks like, people will be shopping in person again. When we think about more of the B2C, they're probably going to be doing meetings in B2B in person again. But the beautiful thing about this now is that we actually have a choice. So if some people go back and they want to continue engaging online, or we have a more remote workforce than ever before, hopefully a lot of these businesses are now in a place where they've really drastically improved their complete online digital process.
And is there any initiatives in particular that your sales teams have been asked for more of?
I think support in general. Something that we saw that was really interesting to us, HubSpot actually at the start of all of this decided to run a really, really large survey where we looked at the aggregated data of 70,000 customers of ours across the world. So because we are, if you're not familiar with HubSpot, because we are a marketing, sales, and customer success platform, we had these really, really great access to looking at insights that were happening across core business metrics. So things like website traffic, email send rates, all the way through to deal pipelines, and even sort of the customer support chats coming through to customer service. So a real good big picture. And something we noticed there within that data and what sales maybe needed more help with was their communication and outreach strategy. So as an example, through the peak of the pandemic here in Australia and New Zealand, sales teams sent more emails than ever before. Unfortunately, the engagement rates were lower than ever before, drastically lower. So I think the exact stat around this at its peak during COVID, if we compare it to before COVID times, sales sends were about 38% higher than they had been previously, but engagement rates were -20. So I think that showed, and it's really hard when you're looking at data at such an aggregated level like that to make theories. But speaking to a few brands, really kind of digging more into it. At a granular level, it does seem that sales teams just weren't equipped to tailor their process quite so quickly, because this was a trend we definitely saw earlier on. And I think, the asks that we saw were both at that sort of internal structural level. We need the tools and equipment to do our jobs from home, and we need new ways to be able to reach out. And when they didn't have those, they just stuck to email, and unfortunately to sort of negative consequences, with those engagement rates really, really dropping from the recipients. And then the other thing was, our emails aren't getting through. Help us. What can we send? How can we be less salesy and more helpful during this time? And I think there was a bigger reliance on sales teams for their marketing teams to really help them navigate that content side of things. And that's one of the biggest things that sort of I saw on our side.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I guess, Sam, Howie, for you, from a sales and a business development standpoint, what are the trends and patterns that you've seen more broadly in the UK market?
Yeah, sure. So from our perspective, generally speaking, we've obviously seen a big shift in the UK around office space working, flexible working. And that's actually impacted in our region where we're doing B2B sales, very consultative sales, where traditionally in the UK, it's quite a traditional market. And just for context, we sell to commercial property landlords and managers. So it's all very interweaved in terms of the trends in the office and working from home and not going into the office and selling to these types of people as well. But a shift from what we would do a more person-to-person in-person selling week, where we would travel, we would spend half a day with a potential client, we would do a demonstration. That's all obviously been tipped on its head. So naturally across a lot of different industries and sales organizations, we've seen, Zoom and virtual meetings play a huge role in this. And the new normal has meant that we've had to really challenge the way that we sell, where we would traditionally need to meet someone face to face to be able to really change their operating system from a technology perspective. We sell software that runs its business critical software. So the challenge we've had is we've seen sales cycles increase. We've seen touch points increase as well, and we've seen a lot of value-added sort of data and information needed to be added to the sales process too, which is really good. So I suppose the biggest impact we've had is moving what we would say is a more traditional in-person sales process to be completely virtual. And because the UK is much more traditional, and a lot of the people we're selling to, are traditional, it is quite different to ANZ and how we can adapt that. The good side, or I guess the flip side to what we've seen, is a lot of organizations have been forced into having a digital transformation plan very quickly. A lot of organizations in the UK actually, believe it or not, compared to New Zealand and Australia, they do rely on server-based systems. They are relatively, I would say, traditional and old-fashioned in how they've run their business. So there has been an opportunity for us to leverage that and flip them into the cloud and flip them into a modern and really get that transformation plan kicked into place early, which is good.
Yep, fantastic. And I guess Sam Williams, for you, ANZ, what trends have you seen from a strategic marketing standpoint?
Yeah, I suppose it comes back to something of what Kat and Sam were saying as well. So we've definitely seen digital transformation initiatives being forced upon organizations. But I think a second aspect has been coming to grips with this idea of doing things at a social distance. And especially in B2B selling, we rely so heavily on in-person contact to build trust, to further the relationship, to nudge, if you like, the sale through the cycle. So what we've noticed is that sales have slowed, and there has been a need to really rethink what is the relationship between sales and marketing. That it's no longer a case of marketing just hurling leads over to sales to follow up. There's been a definite rethinking of how you engage with a prospect and how sales and marketing can work in a much more close-knit fashion to be able to achieve the outcome, which is obviously pipeline growth and moving people down the pipeline.
And in terms of pivots with respect to marketing sales at a social distance, what have you seen in your organization, or what initiatives have you acted on?
I guess one of the very first things that we were confronted with is no more events. So how do you compensate for event-based marketing, which is a significant proportion of what you do in your marketing mix from a B2B standpoint? So, how do you take that in-person social interaction and those meetup type of situations and try and turn it into something that's meaningful for the context that people find themselves in? So what we've seen with event type marketing is organizations have taken their all-day conference and turned it virtual. What we noticed was people don't have time or don't really enjoy sitting at their desks for a full 8 hours to attend something that doesn't have the same social benefit. So coming up with a formula that you could enable people to consume content in bite-sized chunks, so like 30 to 45 minutes, given that we're all conditioned to watching that sort of length episode on TV series, and coming up with the idea of creating a series of different episodes on different topics and dialogues that because we're all in this together, we've all got a common shared problem, which, having conversations and dialogue around how you go about solving that common problem was something that we saw a lot of benefit in, and we got great engagement with.
Yep. It's putting the choice back in the hands of the viewer, isn't it, around what it is that, how long would they like to access content for, where and when they choose to digest that. And yeah, that's absolutely true. We've just seen our viewers wanting to consume in bite-sized chunks and come back and engage over and over again. So it's been really interesting.
You mean after the kids interrupt you while you're watching?
Yeah, there are probably a lot of parents out there going through lockdowns and in the same situation. So absolutely. And so Kat, for you, for those marketers who are watching and wanting to transform revenue generation in their businesses, what practical steps should they implement to get there?
Yeah, I think there's really interesting opportunity for revenue generation at this time. And we think about, there's two parts of this, the strategic and then sort of tools for enablement. At the strategic level, I think there's three key things that companies could look at. And I'll use a couple of customer examples to highlight them where I think they make sense. But the first one is to consider, throughout all of this, do you have a new buyer persona? And as a result, a new revenue stream. And the example I like to use here, and I use them a lot, if they ever actually listen to some of the talks I do, they'll realize I'm a bit of a fan. But very small sort of business based in Melbourne, Australia, Coffee on Cue would supply coffee to the events industry. So, you could go to a conference, a big event, and still get that barista style amazing coffee that we all love here in Australia and New Zealand. Clearly very, very affected by COVID when that first announcement was made in Australia and New Zealand, particularly Australia. I remember the day. I was actually at an event, ironically, when the announcement was made that no more events could happen. You couldn't have, gatherings of more than 5 people or something like that. And, our customer was obviously greatly affected by that. What they did is they realized that throughout all of this, they had a new persona. They actually realized that instead of just doing B2B, they could do B2C. There's a lot of people at home, can't even go out for their coffee in some places. And they had this warehouse full of coffee beans that they would normally be shipping to events. So they spun up almost overnight, no lie, an e-commerce store on Shopify. They connected it to their HubSpot CRM, their marketing tools, and they started to do coffee subscription packages for people stuck at home so they could make their own coffee. I was probably one of their first customers, and I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. I thought just the ability to pivot and see the opportunity there was absolutely incredible. So that's one part, considering if potentially you now have a new buyer persona or a new revenue stream. The second is, and this is what Coffee on Cue did, is to actually revisit your original buyer, your original buyer persona. So what they saw was that with the marketer that they normally target, or the event organizer, events hadn't stopped. They had just changed in their format. So instead of being in-person conferences, there were all these kind of virtual events happening. And so what they did, again, they spun up a new offering for that original persona of theirs, where they could send, if you're running an event, they would send your attendees a coffee pack ahead of time. So your attendees had this kind of physical interactive element to the event. So when the event started, awesome. Ryan, the founder, would actually dial in. He would offer to dial into your event and kick it off with this sort of very lighthearted demonstration of how to make the perfect coffee at home with the kit that you had just received. And of course, isn't it great? And of course, you could brand that as well, your coffee kits that you're sending to your attendees. So just absolutely fantastic innovation. So they kind of did a bit of both, considered, new personas and revisited how their existing customers are now operating and working. And then the third, I would say, is actually a bit of a nod more to what HubSpot did. And I'll use this as an example because I can also appreciate not everybody could be in a position to do this, but coming back to your questions around, what are sales teams asking for? Sales teams are in a really hard place at the moment, and they need the organization to find these revenue streams or be a bit, give them some leverage. And so what HubSpot did was actually really decided to put our customers first, meaning we made a lot of our paid features free. We took off a lot of limits within the product. So, email send limits as an example. Companies are needing to communicate with their prospects and their customers during this time to tell them how their service has changed. But we didn't find it was right to limit that at this time. So we removed those limits. We created more content than ever before. We created a series called the Adapt campaign, which was weekly events around, issues that are facing marketing and salespeople today. Issues like how to work, how to be a salesperson in a remote world, how to run virtual events. So creating more content, being more helpful. This, was part of HubSpot's mantra at the time, which was to help our customers bend, not break. We gave a lot of payment relief to customers in a really, really tight spot. And not all companies are in advantage in a place where they can actually do that. And it was certainly, a little bit of short-term pain, but it really paid off. Our retention rates were super strong. And even sort of any retention drop we had was actually downgrades rather than customers leaving us completely. And when you arm your sales teams with that, especially if they're selling into their existing customer base, not just thinking about net new revenue, but your existing install base, that really gave them a lot of leverage to work with their customers. At a strategic level, I think that's like 3 things you can do. And then there's a lot on the enablement side of that. We're big proponents of the CRM. The CRM is the hub of activity. But more in general, I think now organizations, to enable all of this, have to really be thinking about their tech stack. And we hear about the tech stack a lot, and it sounds at times this sort of impossible place to get to have this perfect tech stack. But organizations really need to think about how they enable, again, their sales teams with a complete picture, and the leaders need to be able to connect all of those dots as well. And I think people are realizing that what's happening in sales and customer experience has a profound effect on what's happening or what will influence your marketing as well. And lastly, it's going way beyond just those go-to-market teams, but we're seeing one of our fastest growing integrations in the HubSpot marketplace is actually Xero. It makes total sense that you'd want to be able to see things like, the payment status now of all times of your customers, like where is that revenue coming from? So I think, the big kind of tactical piece there is to really take stock of that tech stack and enabling your teams of all that information that makes them more effective in their roles.
Yep, absolutely. Completely agree. Okay, and Sam, how has connecting your CRM and sales enablement platform with your marketing systems helped your team better engage and sell?
I'm just going to jump back into a couple of other things before that around social selling that we've seen and what we've done to adapt. So the big one for us in the B2B world is we knew we needed to do, and I think Sam Williams touched on this, but we needed to provide value-add content as part of our sales cycle now that it's all completely virtual. So from our perspective, one of the things we did that worked really well was, and just to put it into context, is we sell to commercial landlords and property managers with property. One of the biggest impacts in the industry is around the rent collection with companies that can't occupy their premises anymore, retail and leisure. We've seen, their businesses shut overnight. So we pulled aggregated data across all of our customers, across 60,000 commercial properties, to produce some really meaningful data around what the rent collection statistics are for our customers. So we ran a whole number of initiatives that went to market around, hey, this is what live information we can pull around some aggregated data. And so we did some initiatives there with our marketing team, which really brought in a whole lot of great new accounts, new initiatives like webinars and virtual roundtables that enabled us to have conversations with potential customers that we never really were going to have or been able to have prior to that. So some of the interesting things that we saw were, in the early days of COVID, we saw fatigue of webinars, right? Everyone got sick of it after a couple of months.
Yep.
So we pivoted to sort of doing virtual roundtables and having industry discussions around some of the things that are impacting this industry. So from our perspective, we got a lot of PR over that time, but I think for other organizations, looking at the industry and looking at how can you add value during the sales cycle, what touch points can you give your prospects that, it's going to be relevant to them during COVID. How can you make the sales cycle different with providing more and more value around data and information that's going to impact them and give them some value during this time as well. So that was really useful for us. It worked really well. We got a lot of press and we managed to have conversations and different initiatives that we never were able to have before. Sam Williams touched on it, the physical events. We always leverage those physical events, and obviously that had changed. So we really went and adapted to that, which was great. And for the sales teams and B2B sales teams, we're finding that we need more touch points than ever. I would say previously we would have an on-site session or workshop followed on with another one after that. What we're finding now is actually we need a high number of touch points using Zoom, using some of these webinars and these initiatives with the data that we're doing. So it's higher volume, but it's high quality too. From a systems perspective, we use HubSpot, obviously. We use Salesforce and we use Outreach for our outbound marketing initiatives, all of which talk to each other. Connecting them is massive for us to be able to look at the lead scores when, we've got someone that has potentially attended 2 webinars, downloaded 2 of our reports. We're going to be able to see the journey they've gone throughout the sales cycle. So, that's been critical for us and, continues to be really important as well.
Yep, fantastic. And so, Samuel, what initiatives have you put in play to transform market engagement?
Yeah, I suppose to try and make that fairly succinct, what we realized is that there was an opportunity to gather more data on the behaviors of people as they move through the sales cycle. So including things like polls so that you could get a temperature check on where people were at. Actually offering up 3 calls to action on the bottom of any given page so that we could start to see whether somebody was just browsing or they are actually interested in this product, or they were just wanting to educate themselves. So in fact, kind of doing things that in some ways were not classified as being best practice in terms of a single CTA on a page, actually introducing 3 different CTAs so that we could start to gather more lead scoring data and information and effectively empower the salespeople, as Sam Howe was just describing, so that you're actually gathering a lot more information on where people are at in the sales cycle. And I guess the essence of it is help build trust and relationship based on those digital touch points and those interactions.
Absolutely. So we've thought about the past and what we're doing right now. What about the future? So Kat, for you, if you're advising a B2B marketer watching today on digital investments heading into 2021, where would you be placing your bets in terms of marketing and selling?
Yeah, when I think about one particular channel that I see so much more, like it's already very high potential, but just it's on this crazy trajectory, is actually on-site chat. The trends that we've seen throughout COVID is that website traffic is an all-time high. People are going to forever have increased their online shopping, their browsing. They're going to be on your website for a long time to come, even when we go back to stores, because we've just got more organizations online now. And so another stat that we thought probably the most impressive stat from all of the benchmark data study that we did was around chat. So customer initiated conversations was up 190%. Very recently, the week of, I'll just refer to my notes because I don't want to get this stat wrong. It was 194% above the week of September 14th, pre-COVID averages. So we're just seeing an explosion in this channel. And it absolutely makes sense, right? You've got a high volume of people coming to the website now because it's the only, key way that they engage with you. And they want answers. And we know today that consumers are more impatient than ever before, and they want answers fast. You know what it's like when you go to a website and they've only got a form. It's the only way to submit a question, and it likely takes days for somebody to get back to you. If you have on-site chat, the response is immediate. Think about how powerful that is when a consumer is on your website and your competitors. If one of you has live chat, the chances are that you're actually going to go with that vendor based on the response time and things that we know about response time. So chat is really incredible for that reason. I love it not just for marketing, but also customer success, sales. There's some great use cases. If you imagine somebody's on your pricing page, how helpful is it if a bot pops up and asks you if you have any questions about your packages or how things are priced, or what are onboarding fees and things like that. So it really allows you, when it's connected to the CRM, that is, to personalize and scale one-on-one interactions, which is pretty incredible. So I'm a big fan of chat.
So Sam, looking ahead to 2021, where are you planning on investing? And perhaps share some insight on where the opportunities and perhaps the risks lie. Yeah,
sure. So we want to double down on some of the value add data that we can provide our customers with. And a lot of it for us needs to relate to COVID and trends in the market. So that puts us as a thought leader, obviously, but also it's going to add value to the prospect. So we want to double down on that. We want to double down on trends relating to COVID and the industry we sell to, so that we know that when we want to have meaningful conversations with our prospects, we have got meaningful things to talk about, not just our system or the product or whatever it might be, which is more traditional. So that's where we're going to double down. We're going to invest heavily in PR to promote some of that data and make ourselves leaders in the market around it. And when we look at the opportunities here, we think that a lot of customers that we would have sold to or that we're selling to, they put a band-aid in place from a technology perspective to help the team quickly adjust to a working from home environment or whatever it might be. What we're going to see long term, I think, is that we're going to need to remove the band-aid and put in place, like Kat touched on, a tech stack that is going to be able to sustain the business. It's going to be long-term a strategy to be able to promote a cloud-based remote working environment. So we see an opportunity of being able to leverage data and everything else in place to put in some of these long-term solutions too. So in terms of investment, definitely investing in our marketing team. We've just hired a new marketing resource for our team because we've had such success with some of these initiatives we did in the last 6 months. We want to double down on the value-add data and really changing the landscape around the touch points in B2B selling. Again, I think gone are the days where we have that kind of half-day on-site workshop. It's a series of touch points by Zoom. It's a series of value-add information over a longer sales cycle. The reality is, in B2B sales for us, for the ones that traditionally would buy quicker, we're going to see a longer cycle, but we need to have that nurture content along the way to help convert these customers. So that would be some of the things I would say there.
Absolutely, good stuff. And Samuel Williams, where are your biggest risks and upsides to B2B marketing as we head into 2021?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of pieces to that. So from a risk standpoint, I think that there are cultural, organizational cultural risks. And so what I mean by that is that if your salespeople have the expectation that things are going to get back to normal in 2021, and you're just going to be able to run events as you have in the past, then you're going to run into problems, because realistically, from a marketing standpoint, trying to plan for events in 2021 as an in-person events is it's too uncertain, it's too risky. So there has to be a different approach from a marketing standpoint to contend with the risk. So that cultural piece and literally bringing sales along in terms of thinking about how the sales cycle is changing and how you need to build a more resilient structure, if you like, from a digital standpoint. And it's alluding to some of the things that Sam Howie was just talking about, using thought leadership pieces, mining your data, providing insights, doing industry type of forums, if you like, so that people can build relationship and trust in a different way. So I guess that's the upside, is that relationship and trust is going to evolve and adapt. It doesn't mean that in-person activity isn't going to take place, but we have to look at it a different model that makes us resilient to the potential to go into another lockdown. And I mean, we've seen that across Australia and New Zealand, where Victoria has gone into a lockdown, Auckland has gone into a lockdown, and I guess, Sam, you're experiencing something similar in the UK in terms of different regions. So whatever it is that you're building, you need to take into account the fact that there's an article called "The Hammer and the Dance" that you may have come across. The hammer is the lockdown, and the dance is starting things up, but not sure exactly what you can and can't do. So the upside is this opportunity to do things differently going forward, build a more digitally resilient business. And the last thing that I would kind of highlight is that I think that B2B marketers need to think more like YouTube content creators. That if you think about your experience of YouTube and the explosion of content that there has been on YouTube during the various lockdowns there, it's about helping people understand problems and find different ways of solving it. I know personally, I found it fascinating watching all sorts of things on video production and learning a whole lot of things about what is the right lighting setup, for instance, to do remote working. And these are from YouTube creators that are potentially sponsored by, Nikon or Sony or organizations. So I think you're going to see a shift in terms of the way that content is going to be produced, that it's not necessarily about doing it in-house. It could be sponsoring, YouTube channels is going to become more of the norm than not.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I actually think, more to that point, that we're going to see teams starting to get more alignment and accountability between the functions and how sales and marketing operate to make sure that we're delivering the best outcomes for our customers and for our future customers. So I think there is so much change going on and so much opportunity in the market. So look, thank you so much, Kat, Sam, and Samuel, for sharing your insight today. It's fantastic. And for those of you watching, you've now heard the advice from our leaders. And, I'll leave you with a question. As you start planning towards 2021, what are the challenges that you're facing, and what are you trying to solve around transforming revenue generation? Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.